Welcome to another episode of our mini podcast, I Built a Company That Makes a Difference by B1. Here we talk to founders of sustainable businesses to get their takes on how and why they started their companies and the lessons that they've learned along the way. Today, we've got Georgia Cobb, co-founder of Ladybird Essentials, all-natural bath, body, and home products that are non-toxic, they're eco-friendly, and they are palm oil-free. Georgia, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. So Ladybird Soaps is actually just a couple years old, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm really interested. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about bringing your product to market since it's still fresh in your mind and your memory for you. And I'm sure our audience really would love to hear. But before we get to that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, of course. So I'm actually a COVID college graduate. I graduated in 2020, right as the pandemic was starting. So that's very interesting. My first jobs out of college were all work from home. It's a very unique time to graduate, very similar to like class of 2008. But I have a degree in business and I actually have a minor in theology from the University of Dallas. So that's where I really got interested in sustainability and good companies, good ethical work. And I mean, there's a lot to me, I don't know really how to summarize myself up in a few sentences. That's always a hard question, honestly.
That is a hard question. And we love at B1, we love talking to young entrepreneurs. I like the energy, the drive, the vision. Can you talk about when you founded or when you said, you know what, this particular company or these products, they need to exist? What was kind of the light bulb moment, or was it a slow build to you saying, you know what, I need to, I can't find what I need to, I'm going to create my own? Or how did this get started, Ladybird Essentials, starting with soaps, right? How did that get started?
Yeah. So it was actually a very, very slow build. My brother graduated college 2014, so way before me, and he's been a serial entrepreneur for a really long time. And I've helped him in a lot of different projects, from art galleries to like video streaming services in Africa. But during high school, I also was working or volunteering actually as a docent at a national park called Fort Davis Historic Society. So I would dress up and we would take kids on tours, like the whole 9 yards, the bustle, the corset, everything. And part of that included learning about how this early American settlers would really live. So that would be anything from hair care to skin care to how they'd eat, clean their clothes. So that's how I really got interested in I would say all natural, sustainable. At that time, I didn't really know what it was, but that alternative way of living. And then I ended up going to university. And I met some wonderful girls who are my best friends now. One is actually a biologist and she's worked on coral reef studies and conservation. So she helped create like the coral polyps and transplant them to restore the coral reefs. And my other close friend works in national parks now. I actually used to do the volunteering with her there at Fort Davis, but now she works in national parks full time and she does like wildlife management, buffalo roundup. She works with ferrets, all sorts of things, children's education, paleontology. So it was like a combination of many things. And then my parents have a background in the medical field, so they've taught me how like the human body works and like the endocrine system and how everything is really connected. So with Ladybird, we really worked and I looked at trying to create an ethical company. So it started when I was in college, actually. I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could create an ethical company. And it's not that I set out to create a sustainable business, it's what happened along the way, because when you start learning about how everything from ingredients to packaging to where you source your products affects the whole ecosystem and the whole world, and like all the stakeholders from people to your employees to animals, you just end up making a sustainable company. So
That's really interesting. Okay, so did you start out saying I want to start with soaps, or was that also something that you discovered along the way when you said, okay, I want to build a company, this a project, but then the product kind of was developed along with your idea, or did you say no, soaps is, I'm going to start here, and then the sustainability portion of the business came later?
Um, so that's a hard question. Yes and no. I remember I was walking about Lyndon Baines Johnson's home, so they call it the Texas White House. And Ladybird just loved flowers. And so that's actually part of the reason why we get the name Ladybird from. And I've been blessed to travel to 48 states out of this country. So the only states I'm missing are Kentucky and Michigan, actually. And I just fell in love with the natural ecosystem, and really we started doing soaps because there's a lot of issues with big name soap products. A lot of things you buy in the grocery store can't really legally be called soap. So if you look on a lot of your products, it'll say something like beauty bar because there's so many chemicals. So we were really trying to figure out a way, how can I bring a love of the natural environment into something you use every day? If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Okay. And then can you talk to us about that first year of being in business? How did you start? Did you were making product yourself? Did you say, I want this to be an e-commerce site? Did you start at fairs? Like, talk to us about the first year of business.
So the first year of business was actually really challenging. You learn a lot in school about how to be a very good employee, but you don't really learn how to run a business. So I had a steep learning curve. And even though I helped my brother in the past with his art gallery and his video streaming services, there's a big difference between a service-based and a like product-based business, or like high-end luxury. So we started, and I remember my first website was just absolutely horrendous. I decided I was going to try to teach myself HTML and CSS all by myself.
Wow.
And yeah, should have not done that. Eventually we shipped over to Shopify, and it's been so much easier since then. So I can't say that our e-com presence at that time was very strong. Most of what we were doing was word of mouth, and we would go to fairs. And I remember those first few months, or that first year, I honestly thought nobody liked our product and they weren't willing to like rebuy it. Because what ended up happening is we found out that our soap was actually lasting about 6 weeks.
Oh,
So
wow. Longer than you thought.
longer than we thought. And the soap you actually buy, oftentimes like Dove or like Dial, it's manufactured in a way where it's going to last you about 1 week in the shower. So 6 weeks, and I'm like, okay, people really hate what I'm making. Like, they just don't want to spend the money. But we ended up getting those repeat customers, and they came back time and again. So I guess when you make something like it's 1880 and you use that old school sustainable method, like the all natural ingredients, when it's taken care of properly, it's a better product. So, I mean, that was what the first year of business was like. It was really challenging. And I would definitely say, don't let your emotions get tied up in it more than you have to, because it's very easy to make your business into your child,
Right.
but it has its own personality, and it's going to grow, and you're going to learn with it what it
Uh-huh.
needs and who it is. So you just kind of have to let it run.
Right. So you were in the first product, the first batches that were coming out, you were making them yourself, right?
I still make a lot of the products myself, actually.
Oh,
So all of the
wow.
products we still make are handmade, just because I know I can quality control it a little bit better. And
Hmm.
the so when you're making it in the old school method we make it, it has to be handmade. So, and I know that I can control like things like pH and what chemicals are going in. Well, we don't use chemicals, what ingredients are going into it a little bit
Hmm.
better than trusting a manufacturer. We've also had issues where a lot of manufacturers don't want to make the kind of soap we make.
Ah,
So
because it needs to be handmade or because it's too labor intensive?
it is labor intensive. It does need to be handmade. It's hard. Well, you can automate it and scale it, but it's just a little bit more challenging, especially
Hmm.
because we're dedicated to sourcing all our ingredients from American businesses or people that are sourcing products, and we're supporting other American small businesses. I
Hmm.
just want to have that control with our suppliers a little bit better.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and then when you get into the packaging issue, so we actually wrap our product in a cotton-based fiber, and we
Hmm.
use a label on it that's called BioStone. So it's made out of recycled rock material from quarries.
Oh, the label
So
is made out of rock.
yeah, so everything we make, I have my two biologists, they look at everything from ingredients to packaging and they ensure that it's completely biodegradable and sustainable. So if I was to automate that, it could make me have to provide concessions and use like a label that's plasticized or something that I know that if it got into the ocean or somewhere
Right,
else, it would cause harm to the environment.
right, right. Okay, so you're doing this now. This is full time from you, or did you start when you launched the business? You launched and it was a full-time venture for you already.
So I was working part-time actually at Amazon in the middle of the pandemic when I started the business. Right now, the business, I do it full time, but I still have another job. So
Sure.
I'm kind of split in between. But we are very involved in the community and like I go a lot of places and it feels like I have two full-time jobs.
Yeah, I
So
mean, you probably do have two full-time jobs. And so you're popping up at fairs and markets locally?
yes, in Phoenix. And then we actually did a huge wholesale trade show called New York Now in August, to get us into retail stores. So we're everywhere.
You're everywhere. Can you talk to us about, I know lots of folks that listen to the podcast and that are on the B1 community who are they're entrepreneurs, they have their product. Can you talk about the process of getting into some retail shops? What have you found and what's, the first step for somebody who's on that journey?
Well, the first step is to start. So honestly, I know that sounds really basic, but you can only start by starting. And then be prepared for a lot of rejection and follow up because nobody cares about your product or your brand more than you do. So honestly, what they teach us in sales a lot of times, and I work for like an international company and working at Ladybird, I've learned that most people don't follow up. And oftentimes your
Mm,
sale is made on the fifth contact. I have entrepreneur friends that have they've had businesses for years, and it won't be till 2 or 3 years of contacting somebody that they get into that store. Because a lot of times what these stores want to see is reliability and they want to see
hmm
consistency and they want to see
hmm
that you care. So don't get discouraged because it is very challenging and you're going to
hmm
make mistakes and that's completely fine.
So did you start by just cold calling kind of retailers, or how did you start?
So I made a mistake and I ended up hiring a marketing agency actually to help me with that. And it was a
Hmm
big, big blunder because, like I said, nobody cares about your product more than you do. So that didn't work out. And I ended up just picking up the phone and calling and calling and calling again. And then
hmm
honestly, like LinkedIn, Google stalking these companies to find out who the buyer was.
hmm
Um, and just emailing repeatedly and calling and bothering them because honestly, you're never going to be at the front of their mind. And if you think it's a lot, usually to somebody else, it's not.
hmm Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really salient point. That's a really good point. All right. So today, what does your distribution channel or network look like? You're direct to consumer, you're doing e-commerce, and what kind of, nationally or locally, what kind of distribution network do you have going on?
So we're in some smaller grocery stores, sustainable ones, and then we have one that we just partnered up with in Indiana that I'm going to ship out an order to in a couple of days. But um Black Friday, like that holiday time is really crazy. So yeah, we're at a few grocery stores, but it's growing, it's been a long road. Wholesale is definitely challenging. It's
Uh-huh.
not where I personally recommend somebody starting. I think starting with fairs and local markets is always best because you get to see that
Mhm.
real-time reaction to your product, and that is invaluable learning.
For sure. So we've got actually some refilleries and organic and sustainable grocery stores as part of our network. If somebody was interested in contacting you to see how they could get a hold of your product, how would they do that?
So you can email me directly at Georgia, Georgia, at ladybirdssoaps.com. And that's usually the easiest way. We do work with refilleries. We actually started that program that I'm very excited about. Um, and what I should say, and I didn't mention this earlier, but when we made our products too, when we were taking care of like all the stakeholders and stockholders, we decided we wanted them to be completely non-toxic. And what that really means is that they're completely edible. So not that I recommend that you eat a bar of soap, but I'm not going to tell you to do that. You shouldn't. But if a kid or a pet took a bite out of any of our products, like sugar scrubs, bath salts, our room and linen spray, they drank it for some reason, because little kids do the craziest things, you don't have to worry or rush them to the ER.
That I
So
think, so I have a toddler who's 2.5 and she's obsessed with helping me clean. So I have various spray bottles around the house that are filled with water and vinegar. So she can help me, quote unquote, clean, but they have enough vinegar that she doesn't drink them. That is really interesting. That is a really good point. Especially about pets, especially about kids. That is a really interesting point.
yeah, the reason I brought that up though is because that's something when we work with our refilleries or other small businesses, that's a thing that they often really like. And it helps them sell the product because it helps their
I mean, yeah,
customers.
that's a really important marketing point, especially especially for parents of young kids. Amazing. And you're not just, we had this conversation just before we started recording, you're not just soaps anymore. So can you just talk to us about what makes up Ladybird Essentials these days? There's lots of different things beyond soaps.
Yeah, so we have soaps. We have I want to say we have our 5 like scents of soaps, and then we have actually a dog bar shampoo. Because we found that a lot of people's pets actually deal with a lot of skin conditions and allergies. And when you go into the grocery store, oftentimes dog shampoo is scented. And I found that my dogs personally don't want to smell like a peppermint. They want to smell like a dog. So we have the soaps, we have the pet shampoo, we have bath soaks, which are really nice. They're very scented. So we have a rose and a lavender scent, and then we have an oatmeal soak that's plastic free. So a lot of those big name oatmeal soaks, they end up having like plastic micro beads in them. So we don't do that. Pure all natural American oats. And then we have sugar scrubs, which honestly are our best selling products now because we don't use an essential oil in that. We use an extract blend. So it's really gentle on the skin. It also has other benefits to doing that. So for example, our Kona coffee, because it has real coffee in it, it helps with like skin tone and it tightens your skin, capillary tone, puffy eyes, wrinkles. And we only use 4 ingredients in that. And what's wonderful about it is that it takes your makeup off as well. So you can use it on your face and your whole body. And if you're having that really lazy day, you can take your makeup off. I know that when I come home from work and I'm super tired, I often use it because it schleps all that grime away and it makes you feel so refreshed. And we have that in we have a lavender, we have a rose, we have coffee, and then seasonally we have a pina colada scent. And so yeah, and they're really, really nice. But upcoming next year, so if anybody's interested, we are going to be releasing our room and linen sprays, and then we have a detergent coming out that's all natural, non-toxic.
That I'm
And we'll dry our
interested in.
clothes.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the detergent. So you talked about next year. What are, besides product expansion, what are your other plans, expansion plans?
Well, so we're actually looking at creating an affiliate program. So if anybody's interested in being part of that, we're going to be doing that next year. We are going to be doubling down and getting into more retail stores, doing more consumer education, because that's what we really like to do, especially from like about chemicals and all these things that go on into the human body through your skin, educating about palm oil. So we do a lot of work there. But yeah, just growing, honestly, developing more products and really just trying to figure out what the human family needs to survive and thrive and get more plastic out of the environment. That's really the goal.
I love that term that you just used, the human family. I love that so much. Just for anybody
Yeah.
who maybe has been living under a rock or something, and doesn't realize the danger of, or the harmful, how palm oil is produced. Could you just give us a lowdown as to why Ladybird does not use any palm oil at all?
Okay. Well, that's a really long conversation, and there's actually a really good book about that called Planet Palm. If anybody wants to read that. But in short, basically, palm oil is harvested through a method called slash and burn. So what they do is they clear cut. Well, first, let me backtrack. They pay people who are like natives living on the land. So like in Malaysia or Indonesia or certain African countries, they pay people who are living sustainably on the land about $400 for their land. So these people like lose out on their farms and their subsistence lifestyle, and then they end up clear cutting the land, and then they burn the land. So they basically take the rainforest and they just destroy it. And it displaces people, it displaces animals, and that's why we're losing things like pygmy elephants and the Malaysian tiger. So it leads to a lot of extinction. So I don't use it because I like elephants and I want to keep them here for the next generation. And I think that people living subsistently in foreign countries really deserve to keep their home. Other than that, like palm oil has a lot of health issues. So it's linked to obesity, and it's in most of our products in the grocery store. So if you pick
It's
some packets,
incredible at how many products that you can find palm oil, including things like oat milk.
yeah, and it goes by many names. So there's hundreds of names for palm oil, and I'm not gonna like get into all of them, but oftentimes too, when you pick up a product at a store and it says like vegetable oil, oftentimes it's not vegetable oil, it's palm oil. I will caveat this and say that a lot of people in Africa do use palm oil as an essential part of their cooking. But and I'm not against that because it's their cuisine and we should preserve things like that. But what ends up happening is when you destroy the natural environment that somebody lives in, you also start destroying their culture because they lose connection to that. So it's another reason I don't use it, because we shouldn't be over dependent on it. And it's just really harmful, because when one part of the human family is suffering, we are all suffering. And when one species is extinct, or like a community loses out on their culture, we all suffer and we lose this rich tapestry that we were created for. And we oftentimes don't think, well, what's happening in Brazil doesn't really affect me. But in reality, it does, because the rainforest is the lungs of the world, you know? And when Brazilians suffer, we're suffering here in America. And that's personally what I believe, you know? So we're all interconnected.
Beautifully said. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes, palm oil. We might put some resources in the show notes, just to put them in there for any further reading. So now let's get to the rapid fire portion of the interview, our conversation. Back in January, when you had laid out your plans for 2023 and you were thinking about everything you wanted to get done, today we're having this conversation and it's Q4, 2023. So did you get everything done in 2023 that you expected to?
Honestly, no. And that's okay, because life never turns out how you expect it to be, but it turned out better. I will say one thing about business and owning your own business. One of the great benefits of it, other than making product and helping people, is because that's really what an entrepreneur is supposed to do, is the personal development you go through. You learn more about yourself than you ever think you could otherwise. So you have to really dig deep and find that strength sometime. So, and I'm happy with the way 2023 went. You know, it's really not like I'm not trying to compete against anyone else, because my customers will buy from me because they're my customers and they value my product. There's no other soapier in the world that's doing what we do. And if there is another soapier that's really like doing something good, I'm not going to try to stop them. So it went pretty good. I'm very happy, and we're only in competition with ourselves, and our business grew this year. So that's the best thing that I can hope for, honestly.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's such a lot of our audience are entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, and that is one thing to always keep in mind. What you just said, life is always, especially in the early years, in any year of business, honestly, and what happened to the global economy this year, but especially in the early years, I see the first 5 years of business, things change so rapidly. And what you set out to do at the beginning of a 12-month period and what happens by the end of that 12-month period could be, pretty off, pretty far apart. And it doesn't mean that it was a failure. It just means that what we thought we were going to do at the beginning of the year is not what we ended up doing, sometimes purposefully, Sometimes it just didn't work out, but you're right. The personal development and growth that happens along the way is like it's huge. It's enormous.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it's important for people to always remember that you are meant to be exactly where you are right now. Um, so, you might fail, but it's not really a failure because you're just finding out something that didn't work, and that's okay. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you got to really keep that attitude of positivity.
So what was your biggest challenge in 2023?
Oh my goodness. My biggest challenge, I think, overall as an entrepreneur is that I think that I have to do all the things. And people really like I have to slow down. And my family, luckily, I have a really good support system, reminds me that you're not meant to do all the things. People are made for a community. And
Mhm.
I think we try to wear too many hats without realizing, especially in the early stages of the business, that when you have a larger company, email marketing, social media marketing, content development, PR, like they're all separate jobs. So if you feel like you're failing and you're doing it imperfectly, um, you're not, because you're just one person. And I think that was the thing that I really learned this year. And that's okay. And you have to be willing to let go sometimes and hand it over to somebody else. Or just say, maybe that's not necessarily my priority right now. Um, because while things like PR or getting into like magazines are nice, that's not sales necessarily, and that's not your customer, and that's not necessarily how you're going to reach people. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, sure. And then let's flip that around. What was the most exciting thing that happened this year?
probably getting into our first grocery store.
Oh,
Yeah.
congratulations. That is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And really seeing that online portion of our business grow, doubling down and seeing that people really love our product. It's been a slow growth, and we deal with a lot of learning curves.
Mhm.
And honestly, like I sometimes when I'm out in public and we're at these events, people will come up and they'll say not very nice things about your business, not really realizing how much care and effort you put into it. But it's that resilience that I learned, that you're not necessarily my customer, and that's fine.
Mhm.
So
It's true. All right. Biggest success to date in the life of your business and setting up the business. What do you feel like was the biggest success, personally, professionally, or however it comes to you?
hmm need to think about that for a second.
Mhm.
I want to say definitely that, like I said, and I've reiterated this, the biggest success has definitely been the personal development. Um, that and just really learning how to be consistent with the efforts, because um, big big avalanches are made by small pieces of snow dropping and creating a snowball. So the snowball rolling down the hill eventually is what's going to create the avalanche of success. My father often tells me that sometimes people are like, oh, they're an overnight success. Yeah, they're an overnight success, like 5 years in the making. So that's really what 2023 has been about. Learning that consistency, getting into our first grocery stores, learning that people saying no doesn't mean that everybody's going to say no.
Mhm.
Just going to where people value you and they want to be part of your community. And really, part of creating a business is creating that community and a family. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
Then let's do the flip side of that. What do you think has been your biggest failure to date? And feel free to define failure however you'd like to.
um I don't know if it's necessarily a failure so much, but as I mentioned before, having to own a business, you learn more about yourself than you ever thought you would. And that first year of business, really learning Ladybird, I ended up having to step back for 8 months. And it was really, really challenging because it was in the middle of the pandemic. I was dealing with like a lot of isolation. I had just moved to a new city. It was
Mhm.
really hard to adjust. I was a young adult. So I went from having a lot of support at my university, all my friends around me all the time, to suddenly just being here in Phoenix, feeling very, very lonely. And I wanted the business to be more than what it was when I started it. But honestly, I didn't know a lot of the things I needed to know, because even though I studied business in high school and college and I helped my brother, there's always that steep learning curve. And I think it's something that we don't talk about enough, but it became really, really mentally taxing. And I got a
Mhm.
huge case of burnout. And
Mhm.
I stepped back for 8 months and I worked on myself and I started going to therapy and whatnot. And there's that often that dark side. We expect things to go quicker than they'll go. And we expect life to be easier than it is. But your business is only going to do as well as you're doing
Mhm.
mentally.
Mhm. That's
Don't
true.
put more on yourself. So oftentimes, like, we end up as entrepreneurs, we tend to like put these blankets on ourselves and try to do all the things. And if you're holding so many blankets, you're gonna fall over.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't necessarily call it a failure, but I would say it was definitely a learning thing. You have to put yourself first, and self-care is never selfish. Take that step back. If you really can't write that marketing email that night, fine, do it tomorrow, but you don't necessarily have to push through it. Because
Mhm.
hustling is great, but it's not great when you stop enjoying Christmas because you're putting so much into it. It's not great when you're not able to be with your family or do those things that really, really matter to you. Because your business is important. It is, and it is your baby. And I know it's so hard to step back, but it's not completely who you are. So you have to be attentive to that whole person.
Really important. I agree with everything that you just said as an entrepreneur myself. So if you could get 85% of the world to adopt a single behavior, what would that be?
That's a really interesting question. I think it would be um compassion and kindness. Um And I don't mean nice, because nice really it can be defined as being global and like easy to push over. I mean kind. So being gentle and sincere and sweet with others, and compassion, being able to stand in another person's shoes, and really like understand where somebody else is coming from. I think today our society is just filled with a lot of anger at other people, and there's a lot of fear, and I think the fear comes oftentimes from the lack of knowledge and the lack of willingness to learn. So stay curious, but don't be judgmental.
Mm,
um yeah, so it's just you can get your point across and you can do a lot more when you come at other people with kindness. And then just don't okay, this is a little odd. Don't do things just for the sake of hurting someone else. So I knew these people way back when I started Ladybird and I really started understanding about plastics. They tended to be part of this political party, and I'm not going to mention what because I don't want to spread like the hate, but they really hated the other political party, and they often associated being like conservative and green with a different political party. So they would intentionally do things to like buy styrofoam and use a lot of plastic and create a lot of waste just to get back at others. And I remember one day they snapped at me and they said, "I don't know why you care. We don't live in the environment." And I'm like, okay, even though we're in the middle of a city, guys, we still live in the environment. There's still wolves here and javelina and all sorts of animals. So stay curious and not judgmental, and open up and really listen to what your brothers and sisters are saying. I think that's the number one thing, because just don't try to be intentionally hurtful or get back at other people. Um, and I will say that, and I will caveat that we don't, especially in the United States, we do associate being green and like green energy with a lot of more liberal leaning democratic behaviors. Not that I want to talk about politics, I'm very political, but some of the most people I know in the world that like really care about animals and environments are also the conservatives. So what I've learned while running Ladybird is that I have customers on both spectrums. And they can be really conservative leaning and they can be really liberal democratic leaning. And it's the one thing that people often meet in the middle on. And I don't think people understand that enough. So, I mean, that's that's definitely what I would say is compassion and understanding. Try to be kind to others, because oftentimes we are more similar than we are different. It's just
I
that we
like
want to go
that.
about that that difference the other way, because everybody wants what's good, true, and beautiful, but getting there is the thing that we all get a little bit mixed up on.
I like that a lot. We are all definitely more similar than we are different. Fantastic. And then give us a plug about where we can find you online, around Phoenix, socials. Where can we find Ladybird?
So you can follow us on our social media account at Ladybird Soap Co. We are on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us online at ladybirdssoaps.com. You can also follow me personally at Georgia Jane Cobb. That's my personal Instagram. But yeah, so that's really the easiest way to get a hold of us is online, usually through to purchase from us and buy. So
Fantastic. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And everybody, I
thank
encourage you to
you.
stop by Ladybird Essentials. If you're in Phoenix, perhaps link up with Georgia at a fair or a market. If not, I encourage you, everybody, to go to check out soaps and essentials, etc., online.
Yep, thank you so much.
Thank you, and everybody else. We'll see you on B1.
Yep, have a great rest of your day.